But welcome, everyone. I'm Erica Offerdahl, the Associate Vice Provost for Faculty Development and Recognition, and you're joining us today for our monthly series on AI. I was actually really delighted because, well, first to read the newsletter that came out from our Dean of Libraries, Trevor Bond. I always find them kind of delightful, but this one in particular I liked because it was making us aware of some tools that are available to us in the WSU community. And then almost immediately after that, I got an email from our team within the WSU library. Suzanne Frick was leading the charge there. And she emailed me and said, we would love to share a little bit about these tools with WSU faculty. Can we kind of move in on one of your AI monthly seminar meetings? And as luck would have it, David Macon couldn't make it today. And so we didn't have to cancel or reschedule, and we get to hear about these cool tools that are available for us via the library. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to let our colleagues introduce themselves and lead you through a little tour and demo of the tools that are available to us. So take it away, team.
Thank you so much, Erica, and thanks again for the opportunity to be here. As Trevor indicated, we're very excited to be able to test out some of these tools. And spoiler alert, at the very end of this presentation, we're going to be asking you folks to help participate in some of our upcoming trials of these tools, because we're librarians. We will use these tools in one way, but different researchers in different disciplines or students at different points of their, intellectual journeys are all going to be coming at these things with different backgrounds and having different needs. So we really want to find out from our whole community as much as possible how you view these tools, what you find them helpful for, what your concerns are, all of those things. And again, spoiler alert, we'll say this at the end, but if you have to leave early, if you would like to be one of our testers to help give us a little bit of special extra feedback, we would love that. Please feel free to give Alex an email at any point, and we will be happy to put you on our list of folks to follow up with later on. My name is Emily Cuckier. I'm a science librarian based out of Owen. I'm joined here by several colleagues today. We have John Schoenfelder, our reference and instruction librarian from Holland, Ontario. We have Alex Merril, who is in systems. And we have online Suzanne Frick, who is based in the WSU Spokane Health Sciences Library. And we're going to be talking today about a couple of different tools for using AI to search and discover and understand things from the scholarly literature in particular. So if we can get to sharing, that would be great.
Broken.
I was going to say, I'm so glad it's not me who has to do this part right now, because it would take 5 times as long. And
that's why I came upstairs. I didn't want to be the one who broke anything. We all know that I break anything that I come within 10 feet of.
Not sharing, John.
Did you whittle the mouse, Chris? You might have gone to sleep.
There we go.
I know
Those are my tech skills. Contribution made.
That was a short time out.
Well done.
Don't forget the wiggling.
Okay. Yeah, I know I put people to sleep, but I didn't realize I had extra power here too.
That has nothing to do with you.
So everybody wants to see the tools, so we'll get there very quickly, I promise. But just to start us off, here's a little bit of a grounding of what we're talking about when we talk about AI in the context of doing scholarly research. So we like to think about these tools in different kinds of categories for how they interact with research. So there's the general tools that we've been hearing a lot about in this series so far. So that's your ChatGPT, your Copilot, Gemini, things that can do many, many things, but are maybe not specifically tailored to looking through scholarly research, even if they can be used for that purpose. There's a set of things which we're going to be talking about today, which we've kind of labeled as retrieval augmented generation tools, or RAG tools, for academic search. I will talk a little bit about that in the next slide for why, at this moment at least, we're recommending that we would like people to use that as one of your starting points if you want to use AI for discovery. It's not to say you can't use the others, but there are a few advantages that we like to point out. In addition to those types of things, you will also start to see, or may already be seeing, databases that we use and subscribe to are already kind of layering in on top different ways to use AI to search their systems. So that might make searching easier, that might be adding in summaries and other things. Those, for the time being at least, are probably going to start popping up alongside what we already do, so no extra subscription, at least yet. But that's another thing you might see. And then last but not least is this concept of agentic AI, which is where you've got an AI system that is capable of sort of reinforcing with itself, sort of a feedback loop to give its own self prompts, or to potentially interface with different AI systems or other things like coding ability or a calculator or whatnot to do more things. And while these might actually be doing more sophisticated manipulation with data and literature, we don't have any tools to kind of point to or recommend just yet for how this might be there, but just kind of wanted to let people know that that is potentially out there in the universe as well. So I teased up retrieval augmented generation a little bit. I promise this is not going to be a technical talk. But basically, this is what differentiates the kinds of models that we're going to be talking about today from the more general runs that you might have heard about earlier in the system. So for a general model, you kind of have you, the user, you're going to be typing in some kind of prompt in natural language that goes off to the generative AI. It will generate a response based on a mathematical analysis of that text, and then it will give you back its continued response to what you said. In this RAG system, we've got an extra step in between all of that same thing. So after you make your prompt, instead of just going to a giant body of text at large, sort of the model's training data, there's an extra layer here where what these models will do is specifically say, I want you to look through a set of documents in particular that we've already called out in advance as being very important for this kind of context. And based on what you find in those things, then you can go ahead and generate your response and send it back to the user. And so in this particular case, that giant pile of documents that we're talking about is scholarly literature. So this could be full text open access papers, this could be abstracts, this could be titles, tables of contents, things that are available to these tools to be able to be searching through in order to create a response in context. And what this extra thing does that is so important in the context of libraries and scholarly research is it's really grounding what we find in what is actual published papers and literature instead of just simply the open web. And the advantage that this gets you is, number one, just sort of thinking about things in terms of that scientific context. You're really reinforcing where you're doing your searching in the papers that are probably going to be most suitable for scholarly purposes. And number two, it really cuts down immensely, tremendously on the problem of hallucinated citations, or hallucitations for short, which is where a generative AI system might go ahead and put out, a citation to a paper that looks entirely plausible, but you go to find the journal or you go to find that specific article and it just doesn't seem to be there. And again, the reason is that, text generation systems aren't always, they're not copying and pasting things, they're generating likely text. And what text looks very likely to show up than something that looks very much like the title of a scientific paper and a journal name and a number of things. Very easy to generate something, but not always going to be true. So please stop asking us to find those articles for you. We're certainly happy to try, but at least be aware that that can be a thing before you ask us to find all those things, because you might be disappointed. Short story long here is that we get around a lot of that if you are sort of starting from a tool that's already looking specifically at those documents. So here are a couple of ways that AI can potentially help you in the literature search process. One of the big things is simply that it takes away the burden from you having to figure out how to construct a very deep, thoughtful searching string in Boolean. You can just kind of put in natural language. It will do some of that heavy lifting for you. Some of the things tools you'll see today will actually do some iterative searching processes to potentially unearth more papers than you would otherwise. You can use AI to also help sort of sort your results by relevance, which has already been kind of a thing in academic databases so far, but AI really, theoretically at least, should do that a lot better. And then in addition to those three things, which kind of help with that process of search and discovery, some additional things that you get from the generative part, again, are you might be able to see sort of a generated summary or, information that's been pulled out of a paper without you having to dig through and read that. And then some of the systems we'll see today will actually also help you sort of refine the searching that you're doing in terms of, asking you literal questions about, the context or how you might want to search in order to improve, hopefully, what it's going to retrieve for you. Now, downsides, we've already, with these RAG tools, kind of gotten rid of a lot of the risk of hallucinated citations. But one of the big things that, are still limiting here is, number one, you can only search through as much literature as these systems have access to, and not all scholarly content is open and easy to get to. There are paywalls out there, and paywalls usually means there's not a way to actually read and ingest that paper. Now, some systems are getting around that. Some of the tools, they're actually going into licensing agreements with publishers to be able to see some things. But at least at this point, that is still not a comprehensive ability yet. So if you really need to be systematic, you kind of have to assume that these tools are not going to be able to access every paper that you might want to see. There's also, the drawback, like generated summaries can pull things out of contexts. They may cite not the source that, that information is actually found in, but another similar one that can happen. Or sometimes even, text that is generated can wind up being false because it missed some context or things. So you do have to be careful. Some tools, when you see a summary or just a list of articles, it might be hard to figure out, are these really the best articles to look at or not? And generated summaries, in essence, we're still working with a system that's a little bit, based on probability and not ground truth. So what you get is not going to be as reproducible, those kinds of things. That said, we do want to see what the potential roles are for these tools in our processes and your processes. So hopefully I didn't take up all our time. And what I'd like us to do is to pass over this presentation to Suzanne, who is going to start off a search in Undermind. This one particular tool tends to take a little bit longer than some of the others, so we're going to get a search started there and then demo some others in the interim and then come back to Undermind's results so far. So if you can help me transfer control so that Suzanne, our co-presenter, can bring up Undermind, please.
And you should be able to share your content now.
Suzanne, you're still muted.
Let's go. Getting ready to say that.
Great. Know that our students who are headed into professions where they need to make evidence-based decisions really need some intentional methods for weeding through information overload. And so we see students sometimes coming into health professions programs who have never done a literature search. They have never used a disciplinary database, and many of them have not narrowed down a literature search to higher levels of evidence for a research prompt. And so because of that, often students using these new AI tools are comparing them to a Google search. And while these tools are much better than the Google searches that they have been doing, they do have some deficiencies. And so we've already looked at that, and Emily's already talked about that. I'm going to demo Undermind and know that it's one of those systems that doesn't have access to subscription resources, so it relies on open access articles and abstracts, mainly through Semantic Scholar, but apparently starting in December, it started to do a bit of web searching along with it. So many of these systems do a combination of things. I like Undermind because it tends to work at the expert level. It comes in at an expert level. It uses disciplinary terminology. It is really organizing things in a logical order, and it is not overly positive. I like that about it. It also will do a predictive, it gives you a percent match to your prompt for each entry within the reference list. And it also allows me to share a link with students. And so I use that a lot through my Undermind subscription. I can then share a link to both the HTML and PDF with a student. We're going to start with Undermind because it does take longer to get a response back than some of these other systems. And then we'll go ahead and move on in. So I have already logged into Undermind here. You'll notice I've put our prompt in. We're all looking at the same prompt today. I didn't word it as a question. Some of our students word it as a question, others don't. So we just did a very basic prompt of comparing ketogenic diet to intermittent fasting for weight loss and long-term health. The only requirement for Undermind is that your prompt be over 15 characters. So what we really love about Undermind is this initial step. It will provide you a list of clarifying questions, and these are often questions about the specific population that you are asking about. It will also ask about maybe the ideal study type that you're looking at. And it will ask what types of outputs or outcomes that you're looking for. So this is really a great opportunity to sit down with a student and get to a deeper level on the question. And so, we can decide, do we want to focus on everybody or focus in on the average adult? What are the interventions we're looking at? And more specifically, when I did this previously, this is the first time I've run a question twice, but it was distinguishing between 12, 13-week studies and 6-month studies in terms of outcomes. So this is really the most powerful step that we tend to find. And you can reply as specifically as you want. It's still going to generate a report. So I'm going to say that I'm focusing on the population of adults. I'm not really going to specify more on that. I can get into real detail, but I do want to look at comparative studies, high-level single component studies, and short and long-term cohort studies. Again, I could get into much detail, but I'm going to submit at this point. And now it goes into a thinking phase. Oh, it wants a few more things to fine-grain my result. I'm going to reply that I'm happy with broad conclusions. Great. And now it has rephased my proposed search topic. Again, stayed pretty broad, but it did add in, cardiometabolic health, adherence, safety, long-term sustainability. And I'm now generating the report. And now we're going to move over to one of the other tools, and we will come back to this because this phase takes a little while.
Maybe we can even time it so we can give people a sense for the amount of time needed for that particular sort of search.
So if we could go back to screen sharing here, while Undermind works on its report, I'm going to work on a different system that is somewhat analogous to Undermind, but that works a little bit differently, and I think is maybe better positioned as more of a general kind of scholarly reference, in that it isn't going to be asking the kind of probing questions that Undermind had. I'd like to start browsing anytime now. So we're going to look at consensus AI. And at the moment, consensus AI is actually connected to our WSU systems. So if you have a WSU email address, you should be able to sign up or sign in with that. So I'm just going to sign in really quickly here. Yeah, well, you know, security is an important feature, and so we don't want to skip out on important safety features like that. So it should pretty soon here get me a. So what I would say, yeah, in terms of the difference between consensus and Undermind, and they are competitors in this same sort of environment. A lot of different companies are trying to go and sort of pioneer what it looks like to do this kind of relevant search. And so you might have already been familiar with some different systems that are currently available on the market. We're just looking at the ones that we're testing. Perfect. Okay, so we are going to compare a ketogenic diet. Yeah, the keyboard isn't efficacious as I would hope it was.
Apparently we need a new keyboard.
Yeah, maybe so.
I blame AI.
Well, the light's still green, so. Okay. So one thing that I think is kind of important to point out is that it's going through a couple of different steps here, and the major steps that it's using is what you could call semantic search, which is to say it's not using an LLM or a large language model to go and do the initial search. It is instead doing something that's more comparable to a Google search and sort of like taking your natural language question and slicing it into a series of different searches. Then after it goes and gathers up a huge amount of resources, something on the order of 200 or 300 different resources, it will then go and start to narrow it down. So it will narrow it oftentimes by journal quality. So if the journal has certain quality metrics, it will go and reduce down the number of total sources that it's looking at, basically trying to narrow in on about 20, and then ordering and ranking their relevance before generating the text that it has. So here it's offering up, and these might be sort of features that you've seen in other systems. It's offering up some summaries. and giving you where it's claiming that it's pulling that information. One of the advantages that we have in a system that's connected to our library systems is that it can actually go and connect to our libkey. So we'd be able to actually go directly into a full text if that is available. It will also go and do some different formatting things to try to go and make the information digestible. Some of this being generated material. So again, we do want to keep our critical thinking in mind, especially as we go and compare, what's an interesting piece of literature to what the generation is telling us. One option that we have too is to export the report. So we can go and actually use this and share this through things like directly emailing a PDF. You can also go and use a share button in the top right corner to go and create a link that would be able to link a user to this report. So that way they can go and not only see the report, but then start to ask some follow-up questions or interact with the different results that you find. It also has here a resource list, so you can actually go through all the different resources that it was able to pull up. While it is only generating based on the top 20, it will actually go and let you scroll through all the different results that it found in its search that it considered relevant enough to look and rank. A couple of other things to think about just in terms of like what you have here in terms of filters. This is working on hundreds of millions of different research papers, but there are options if you're looking specifically at medical, where being able to narrow down on a specific kind of medical literature is really important. Consensus does have that sort of deep research process that's similar to Undermind. It does take quite a bit longer, and it is really for if you want to use it as an important maybe step forward in a literature review. And on our trial basis, there are some monthly limitations on how often you can use the deep search feature. And then filtering, it does give you some filtering on the specific literature that it's going to pull up. And I think that those are sort of the important filters to think about. If you do want a specific age range in terms of its publication year, it does go and have some markers for methodology. So if there are particular kinds of methodology that you're looking at, you can try to limit down the literature to those methods. And then it also offers fields of studies. So in the same way that the medical limiter there will go and try to narrow down the kind of literature, you can also go and filter down different kinds of content types. I will say I had a couple of other examples. I did ask it this weekend, how old does a child need to be before getting a haircut? And I do like the fact that it was clear that there is no medical or scientific minimum age. In fact, what it ended up finding was not specifically relevant to the particular question that I asked, but was trying its best to try to fit together my question with what literature was out there. So it actually did go and talk a little bit about how to maybe not where the medical cutoff for getting a haircut is, but instead how to go and acclimatize a child to getting haircuts, because that seems to be where the literature lives. There's also something that they have, a consensus meter. So essentially, if you're asking a question and the system flags it as a question where there may be some consensus building about the answer to that question, it will go and try to organize the results in a way to visualize and organize the literature. So that way you might be able to go and start to make some sort of evidence-based claims. Now, this is especially where the source fidelity might be really challenging because what it says is a yes and what it says is a no is not always clear, and it often requires that you do get into the literature. But this is where it's really important to recognize that these systems aren't a replacement for engaged literature review. It's just a tool for you to be able to do some early synthesis, maybe introduce some critical thinking early on in your process, so that way you're able to go and engage with the literature with a little bit more gusto to start. So that's all for consensus. Emily.
Yeah.
And then, Erica, are there questions in chat we should attend to?
There was one question that was already attended to in chat, basically wondering if these will be linked through the library's website. the tools. And Ann Dyer replied to that already. So I think we're good.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone. Oops. To John's point earlier, I'd say one thing that well, in terms of these perhaps not being the be all and the end all of the research that you do, one of the things so far that I've read, at least, that I think is most helpful in thinking about how to use these tools in your process is to see them as orienting or mapping tools to get a sense of what literature might be out there, and in general the shape of what it's about, particularly if it's a field that you are not all that familiar with, rather than relying heavily on the generated text and the lists. It should really be a quick starting point for you to then have a better feel for the landscape of literature that you can then dive into a little bit more. Okay, cutting and pasting seem to work. So this is Scite AI, another tool that's available. You'll see the interface looks quite similar to Consensus. In terms of the other, this is also more of a single shot tool rather than a deep iterative tool, but it will do what we're looking for. And this platform, I would say, is distinguished from the other two. One of the main ways is that this is a company that has engaged in some licensing agreements with a few publishers. So I think Wiley's on that list, Royal Society of Chemistry, Springer Nature. So to some extent, they have quote unquote read through some of that paywalled content in order to be able to generate information from that. That does not mean that you in turn will be able to query the entire thing or read it. It just means that what it generates here can reflect the words that it's seen in there. And so you kind of saw it took a similar 10, 20 seconds to process things through. Before I dig into this, I'm just going to point out one nice thing is that you can actually see how it has chosen to translate your question into the search strategy that uses. So just like John said, Consensus does, this is largely using a Boolean search on the literature that it's going to be retrieving, but the Boolean search itself is constructed using natural language processing of this question. And you can see how it chose to create and interpret those searches. And if you want to, you can even suggest revisions to them if you think it's maybe off target, or you can use this for a way to figure out your own searches if you want to be taking them into another database later on. So you can view things that way. The references along the side here are going to be shown in order in which they appear in the summary. Oh boy.
That's why joining our trial will be so important for your future use.
There we go. Okay, this is I'm gonna let you do this.
Well, I'm gonna, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm gonna see.
My phone is currently a brick, so I am unable to do a lot of looking up of things like my Bitwarden generated password for this site, which is unique. So thank you very much for this aid.
Nice.
All right. We've got some positive feedback already.
Batteries.
Oh.
Oh no.
I was gonna say, we have some in the white cabinet down there.
Yeah. I'm gonna see if it might not log me in. Yeah. And while I love all of you, I don't really feel like broadcasting my password. Potentially.
Okay, let's maybe hop out and, well, here's a question. Suzanne has Undermind finished, don't say that. If Undermind has finished its review, then maybe we'll hop back to you for a bit. If not, we can certainly take questions that people have about what we've presented so far.
Yeah, I can share the Undermind review. So hopefully you're all seeing the return report from Undermind. Remember, we made this a pretty general result. What I do like is that it gives you a pretty, direct response about what it found and couldn't found. Long-term sustainability data are limited, and so it does tend to come to some conclusion and give you an idea of the evidence level. I use that a lot with students because sometimes they're asking a really broad question, or they're asking a question about which there is not a lot of data out there, and this does help them figure that out to some extent. And then it breaks it down into various very detailed and specific bullet points. It categorizes the data, scopes kind of what it has found. It also gives a timeline, which is very helpful. And then breaks it down eventually into foundational work and adjacent work. I mentioned earlier that it gives these, percent match to your research question. And so you'll notice here that it had a few that are 100% match. But then you get down to very quickly to ones that are much lower match. I'm going to click over. I have asked this question twice of Undermind, so I'm going to click over to a previous report where I asked the same question, but I really focused on long-term studies. So it was looking for over 6-month studies. And you'll notice that the percent match is much, much lower on that question. So it definitely makes a difference in how you revise that prompt. The other thing I want to show is this PDF link up in the corner. So I'm going to open this in PDF form, and then I'll reshare my screen because I realize you cannot see the PDF until I do that. So let me stop share and reshare. So now I believe you're seeing the PDF report. It's much easier for students to work through this. It's basically the same thing, but in PDF format. They really like sort of seeing how a question is scoped. That's a real value of a lot of these tools, is especially if they have a really broad question, they need help in sort of focusing down on that. And then it gives you tables. So the tables are organizing information. We saw that in the other tools. It again gives you quite a few tables. And then I'm going to scroll through the timeline down to the reference list. Foundational work, sorry, we get down. And then in your reference list, you can actually link out to the publications, so you can confirm that they are there. So all of that is, I think, really helpful for students, whether you use it at the start of a research project or you use it at the end. I've used it in both ways, depending on what they're working on. It's not an exhaustive search by any means. It's an exhaustive search of open access materials and abstracts, but when we search databases, we find subscription resources that are not in these, and vice versa. So it really needs to be used, I think, in combination with a traditional literature search at this point in time, because no databases cover everything, including AI tools. Any other questions on Undermind? I think what we can, I may share this again and give you some idea. This was a question that is looking at nutrition. And so what we have found is often there are some pretty poor journals in here. It's not evaluating the journal quality. Whereas if you're using a traditional database, you're going to have that ability to see, is it indexed for Medline? Is it indexed for Web of Science? Within our Web of Science, you can link out to journal citation reports and get information about the journal in a way that you can't in these. And so we do find poor quality journals cited in these AI tools. And there is really not a way within the tool to evaluate that. I see some hands raised in the chat. Should I call on these people?
Sure.
I'm seeing Julian right now. Julian, do you?
Hi, yeah, I had a question, and understanding, of course, that there are a variety of courses and of course students who might make use and professors that might make use of these tools have a variety of end games, what they're going for in terms of.
If you dial into the Zoom, then we can.
One of the questions that I have is if those courses that are kind of geared toward research as process, right from the very beginning, that they're self-designed, self-motivated research projects that each step requires, critical thinking as part of the learning outcomes. I wonder what if there's a ultimate benefit in kind of offloading that power. And I think about searches, in the very, very rich, robust WSU libraries databases, that key terms and students being able to formulate those key terms as part of the process of thinking about their research. I'm kind of, I'm wondering what thoughts you have about the problems associated with then maintaining those standards of critical thinking in the basic search, and often the part of the research that's, it's at the beginning, it's the most critical.
I fully agree with you, and I think that's why we wanted to present this now and not at the start of next semester when tools are available. And it really is a point that faculty need to discuss. These tools are out there. I find with the students that I work with, granted I'm at the professional or graduate student level, that many of them don't have the ability to critically evaluate, and that's going to be super important as we head into the AI stage. But we start our conversations at a much higher level when we use these tools, at a level that they just often never get to when they're using traditional tools. I can start by having that conversation about what study type answers your question. And sometimes it takes a long time to get to that point when we're going through traditional search tools. So I agree, it's a great point for conversation, but I do find that we can start at a higher level, but they still need to do the work of evaluate.
Yeah, I would also say that if this was going to totally replace the literature search, that would be really problematic in terms of students engaging with literature thoughtfully and then developing off of what they learn to learn deeper and newer things and reflect on that development process. I think that this might offer an opportunity to have students engage with a body of literature that they might be able to start to grapple with, but then give them opportunities to have critical reflection. Like, this is the way that I worded this particular query, and this is how I'm getting these results. In the same way that you might do the same with just, you know, a keyword search or with subject term search, you might ask for a critical evaluation of how your search created the results that are being created. And I think that this might be a tool that can help go and have that shared experience of trying to search through the literature, trying to engage with it thoughtfully and critically, and then returning to you in class and saying, this was my experience, this is how I reflect on it. Is that the same experience that other students have working with these information systems?
I'll hop in just a little bit and say, so Mike Caulfield, who's a fellow who's done a lot of work on searching and how people look and evaluate information, he has sounded a little bit hesitant actually to point students, particularly undergrad students, to this type of tool for searching the research. In part, I think because they are sort of a little bit new still to researching scholarly literature, and this might not even be the entry point. He almost would kind of rather, he's presented some things on how to use or think about using more of the general AI tools as opposed to the RAG-based ones to, with undergraduates to sort of, you know, evaluate information and prompts to get more context, those kinds of things. And so this is, again, one of those things that we're hoping you folks will help us figure out in terms of where in a student's educational journey process is this the right thing to point to, because it might not be the right place to start. I'd feel better about giving it to a graduate student just because I expect them to have seen a little bit more literature and kind of know already how it's organized. So that's definitely something to think about when testing.
Well, I think just to add on to that, and this will be it for me. You know, I teach an 100 level course and 4 sections of it to 250 students a semester. You know, go through that process, and they're incoming, most of them they're incoming, you know, go through that process of interacting again with you know, the library databases and finding sources and using, you know, key terms that they've culled from you know, from earlier kind of preliminary research. You know, these sort of scaffolded assignments kind of help them again to think about how to start research and to think critically about their sources. I would probably say that, you know, maybe the first year student, there's a high likelihood that they might kind of misinterpret the purpose of the tools in their research, you know, without quite a bit of guidance, perhaps. But I think that maybe to say one of the potentials might be in using these kinds of tools to come up with a viable topic. Not so much, you know, locating all of the sources they would need for that project, and maybe as some of you pointed out later on in the process, taking that to the next level with some of these more advanced tools. That's my thought.
And also understand that Undermind the trial is a seat by seat trial. And so I think we have discussed whether it would potentially just be, you know, limited to faculty. Therefore, faculty could demo it in a question to students. The students have then the benefit of, you know, seeing those clarifying questions and working through a problem and learning where there are issues in these tools without it necessarily being open to the whole student population. I see Travis's hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Julie, and I also teach a 100 level class. I teach English 101. We're switching over to a system where we're going to be teaching a synthesis paper as well as a research paper. I'm thinking probably at this point, if we do end up like being able to implement or orient students to these tools, it's probably going to be something like, hopefully we'll be able to find a way where we'll be doing kind of a very much smaller research paper for the synthesis paper, where we're just going through the WSU libraries. They're understanding what kinds of sources they're looking for. We're building a much smaller scale thing, but then the research paper itself, like I mean, with this tool, I'm able to ask them like to not just go out and find a good diversity of information, but to like tell me what the academic consensus on their question is. So I know it's a lot of work, 2 different research papers, 2 different research processes, but right now listening to this as a 101 teacher, like that's what I'm thinking, probably like introduce it to them first in an assignment where they only got to go find like 4 things. And then the research paper itself, maybe using this tool.
All right, with the time left, I think we are ready to show a little bit of Scite, if that's all right. Could I perhaps just share from here
Yep.
and then, okay. So I'm logged into Zoom now. And we'll, oh, Suzanne, if you're able to stop sharing, then perfect, thank you. Okay, I'll make this brief since I feel like we've already gotten a lot of the idea of what these tools are like. I'll just point out a few things about Scite that's maybe a little bit specific to this. So like consensus, it'll give you a summary like this, and it'll give you references. You can hover over them to see a little bit of sort of where they think in the article the particular point that they're making is actually available in that article, which can be very useful for checking, especially because it's not 100% exactly sure that that's the best summary of what was actually contained there. You can get more information about those different articles over here in the sidebar. And in particular, again, what really distinguishes Scite from these others is this little section here, which they refer to as describing the citation statements. So this is something that Scite AI has kind of made their own bread and butter, which is they are trying to contextualize the way different papers cite one another. So if I am to click on this, for example, what their algorithms have done is go through a paper and figure out, okay, who has cited a particular paper, and is that citation, you know, sort of positive, negative, or neutral, in terms of, you know, does what cited this thing kind of back up with or agree with what the thing with the paper says. That would be considered a supporting citation. Something that just happens to refer to something but doesn't really critically engage with it would be, you know, just happens to mention it. And there can be ones that, you know, contrast or, you know, actually are, you know, conflicting in some way. So that can be a really nice way to identify points of contention in a field, or simply just to see which papers are sort of being cited more and cited, you know, not just in a way that, you know, it's getting attention, but it's getting positive attention. And I apologize. Here we go. Okay. A lot of the ones that have very few citation statements, just if they're not all that engaged with, might not be as useful for your thing as well. So you can kind of use that as a metric to get a sense. Here's one that's been engaged with a fair bit more. And then there are similar tools in this as some of the others. So if you wanted to copy or export your references, you can. You can get a tabular view as well, like consensus. It will actually regenerate this when it does this, but it will, you know, again, extract some of the information from the paper, and you get a little bit of ability to customize what appears here. In this case, the default is just to simply kind of contextualize how your results, how this particular result relates to or answers the question that you asked. But we would love to mostly I'll leave more time for people to have questions and or to sign up for our trial. Right, I don't have the presentation open, so I'm going to stop sharing. If we can pull that up again, that would be great. All right, out of the confusion. Need to put that to be like this. Okay, yeah, just again, reminder, think about how different students might use these, what students might need to know to be able to use these well, and how it might actually work in your course. So here's a little bit of information again about the trials that are going to be upcoming and who to contact. Yeah, are tools able to search for materials in foreign languages? The question is, I think, again, it depends on the particular platform and the foundational models which they're using. Often these models do tend to be able to translate, but how well they do that is going to depend on how much training data is out there. So I would feel a little bit better for languages that tend to be well represented in the literature in your particular area to get something reasonable in there. That's my off the cuff response.
And I would say too, something that would be really valuable in testing is testing and searching, like if your question is in a foreign language, because it will go and pull foreign language materials, but I'm not sure how well their semantic search tools work in taking a foreign language question and searching through the whole literature. So that would be an important thing for testing.
All right. Are there any more questions or comments or things people would like to share in our last few minutes here?
I will say that we do have a plan for January 20th being when we'll be able to have the full trial for all three of these tools. As I demonstrated, consensus is currently available. So if you do have a WSU email, you should be able to go and create an account and have it connected to our library. But yeah, we'd be really happy to have any level of interest or engagement with the trials, because these systems aren't useful unless people are out there using them, and we can only do so much in the library in terms of anticipating what our users would want. And so you, as our users and the people that we would like to support, we would really love your feedback on this or really any topic that you have with AI or any of these information systems.
Any
Thanks
other
very much.
questions? Sorry, Emily, you were speaking.
Oh, I was just going to say thanks to everyone in the chat who's been asking some very great questions, and to folks who are also helping to answer some very great questions.
Yeah, this was a very interesting session. Thanks for being willing to share with us and get us thinking. And I hope you get lots of volunteers for testers, because we want the whole community to be involved in this.
Very cool. Thank you.
And I see lots of thank yous in the chat, people signing off. Yeah. All right. If there aren't any other questions or comments, let's thank our team for being here. And make sure you're checking your emails to see what's happening in January and how we can all be involved.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Have a great Monday, everyone.
You too.
Thanks.
Let's get one.
Okay.